Close your eyes for a moment, not just to block out the world, but to open the door within. Let the noise of your day dissolve into silence. Let the opinions, the roles, the endless demands of the outside world begin to fade. Come back, not to your past, not to your problems, but to the center of your being. That still, untouched place inside you that existed long before you learned your name, long before life gave you labels. You are not here by accident. I need you to feel the weight of that. The very fact that you are listening to these words, now, in this moment, is not coincidence. It is orchestration. You are part of a design more vast and intricate than your mind could ever comprehend. And within that design, you have been placed with purpose, with precision. You are not the echo of someone else's dream. You are the original blueprint of something sacred. For too long, you have lived as though your spirit were asleep, functioning, performing, existing, but not fully alive. And it's not because you are flawed. It's not because you are missing something. It's because no one ever told you the truth, that you were born with spiritual gifts. Not earned, not given after a certain level of achievement, but embedded in your being from the very beginning. Maybe you felt it before, in subtle ways. Maybe you've always had a strange sense that you could feel the emotional climate in a room before anyone said a word. Maybe you've spoken something out loud and moments later it happened. Maybe you've woken from a dream and found it playing out in your waking life days later. These are not accidents. They are not flukes. They are fingerprints of your gift trying to remind you who you are. And yet, for so long, you've questioned yourself, doubted what you feel, suppressed your sensitivity, because somewhere along the way, the world taught you that spiritual gifts were for someone else, someone holier, someone more disciplined, someone who looked more chosen than you ever felt. Maybe you were told that only prophets and mystics could receive visions, that only saints could carry healing in their presence, that only the worthy could be filled with wisdom from another realm. But I'm here to tell you something radical. Every soul carries the imprint of the divine, and yours is no exception. You've walked through years wondering why you didn't quite fit, why you seemed to carry emotions too big for your body, why crowds drained you, why silence spoke louder than noise, why sometimes you just knew something and couldn't explain how. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not strange. You are spiritually wired. You are divinely designed. There is a frequency inside you that doesn't match the static of the world. You are tuned to something deeper, something higher, something that can't be measured by logic or taught in a classroom. And the reason you felt tension between who the world expects you to be and who your soul knows you are is because you are living in the space between forgetfulness and remembrance. This moment is not about learning something new. It's about remembering what you were born with. Your gift is not something to be found in the pages of a book or the teachings of another. It is something you've always had, hidden beneath layers of distraction, pain, and performance. Pause here. Let that settle, because we are taught to chase, to strive, to prove ourselves worthy of power. But the truth is, spiritual power isn't granted to those who achieve. It is unveiled in those who surrender. You don't need to perform for your calling. You don't need to hustle for your anointing. Your spiritual gift is not a reward. It is a part of your original code, a thread in your soul's fabric. And it's not asleep because you're lazy or undeserving. It's asleep because it's waiting for you to believe it's real. Somewhere, sometime, you were taught to fear your inner voice, to mistrust your intuition, to doubt the dreams that left you weeping or the inner pull that made no sense. And so, like many, you buried your gift beneath a life of predictability. You exchanged magic for logic, spirit for strategy, power for approval. But here's the truth you need to reclaim. What the world calls weird is often wonder. What the world ignores is often divine instruction in disguise. There is a voice inside you, quiet, consistent, that never left. Even when you silenced it, it waited. Even when you tried to ignore it, it remained. And today it is whispering again, not with demand, not with shame, but with holy invitation. Because your life is not meant to be merely observed. It is meant to be activated. That persistent knowing, that unshakable compassion, that sense of something more. These are not side effects of a restless heart. They are signals. Signals that your gift is alive and longing to be expressed. And I know you may feel like you've missed it, like too much time has passed, like you've strayed too far. But here's the beauty of spirit. It doesn't operate on human timelines. It doesn't revoke what was written for you. It waits for your yes. That's all. No ceremony, no title, no permission slip needed. Just a single agreement between your awareness and your essence. I am willing. Willing to remember. Willing to trust again. Willing to live as if the gift inside me is real. You've been trained to seek signs in the sky. But what if the sign is the very ache inside your chest? What if the confirmation you've been begging for is the peace that comes when you stop pretending you are powerless? Your spiritual gift will not announce itself with thunder. It will whisper with clarity. It will make itself known in your stillness, in your honesty, in your vulnerability. And that's what this moment is. A turning, a return, a remembering. Let the layers fall away now, the doubt, the fear, the old stories of not enough. Let them dissolve like mist in the presence of your inner fire. Because that fire is awakening now. Not with rage, but with reverence. You are not called to become something new. You are called to remember something ancient. You have been told to wait. But your gift is not waiting on time. It's waiting on alignment. You have tried to find yourself through doing. But your identity is not in what you do. It's in what you already are. And what you are is gifted. Your voice doesn't need to sound like anyone else's. Your gift doesn't need to look like fire. It may be a whisper, a gentleness, a quiet strength, a way of seeing the world that others overlook. But don't let its softness fool you. There is power in stillness. There is force in silence. The world is desperate, not for more noise, but for more presence. And when you remember who you are, you become a mirror for others to remember too. This is not performance. This is purpose. This is not spotlight. This is soul light. You don't need to rush. You don't need to understand every step. You only need to say yes. Say yes to the divine within you. Say yes to the gifts that chose you. Say yes to the truth that's been waiting for you to believe it. Because you are not just someone listening to these words. You are the reason these words exist. You are not waiting on a miracle. You are one. And it's time the world sees what heaven already knows. You are ready. There is something strange about always being the one who notices. You've probably lived much of your life on the edge of every room, not because you were excluded, but because something in you preferred to observe. You watched people's faces as they spoke, and somehow, you understood more than their words ever said. You walked into spaces and felt a heaviness no one else seemed to recognize. And at times, you questioned yourself for it. Wondered if you were just imagining things. Wondered why everyone else could walk on, unaffected, while you were carrying the weight of the atmosphere in your chest. But what if I told you that what you call overthinking is actually deep perception? What if your too much was simply a language of spirit, trying to be heard in a world addicted to noise? Most people measure gifts by their visibility, how loud, how grand, how obvious. But the spiritual realm doesn't function like that. It whispers in nuance. It codes wisdom in emotion. It doesn't scream, it resonates. It moves not in popularity, but in precision. And so your sensitivity, your deep inner life, your ability to feel things before they happen, it was never a curse. It was never a defect. It is evidence of divine calibration, a spiritual antenna attuned to dimensions others have forgotten. You may not have called it a gift before. You may have called it anxiety, empathy, weakness. But what if it's actually inner sight? What if you weren't born to block things out but to absorb, so that you could translate the invisible into healing for others? There's something sacred about the ones who feel deeply. They're often the ones who cry alone so no one else has to. They are the ones who sit in silence because they don't want to take up space. They are the ones who pray for people they've never met, whose names they'll never know. Why? Because their heart hears what their mind doesn't need to explain. Their soul reaches before their logic does. And that is a spiritual gift. But the tragedy is this: the world teaches these souls to shrink. It rewards the loud, celebrates the bold, uplifts the visible. And so many gifted ones walk through life disoriented, not because they are lost, but because they've been trained to ignore their internal compass. They've been told that dreams are just stories, that coincidences are accidents, that emotions are distractions. But the Spirit speaks in all of these. It speaks through the ache you can't explain, through the pattern that keeps showing up, through the moment of peace that arrives out of nowhere when you're about to give up. These are not random. These are reverberations of a higher language. You've likely had moments, subtle, quiet moments, that you dismissed as irrelevant. But if you look back, you'll see the pattern. You felt something shift before the news ever came. You walked away from a path that didn't feel right, and only later realized you were spared. You sensed a name in your spirit, and then heard that someone needed help. These are not tricks of the mind. These are previews of the gift at work. And the gift doesn't need you to understand it fully before it flows. It only needs your willingness not to block it. But it's hard to trust the unseen, especially when no one has affirmed it, especially when everything inside you feels like it's moving against the pace of the world, especially when your softness has been mistaken for weakness, your silence for absence. Let me speak directly to that place. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not irrelevant. You are wired differently because you were sent to listen in ways others can't. You were born to decode spiritual frequency that others walk past. And yes, that can feel lonely. It can feel exhausting, but it is also profoundly sacred. Because in a world drowning in distraction, the soul that can feel is the soul that can heal. Your gift may not always look powerful to the world. It may come through stillness, through the way you sit beside someone without needing to fix them, through the way your presence alone makes people feel safe, through the words that seem to rise from somewhere else when you're comforting someone. This is spirit flowing through you, not for show but for service. You've probably questioned this power because it doesn't always feel like power. It often feels like burden, like carrying something you don't have a name for, like knowing things you didn't ask to know, like breaking over things that others laugh at. But that is the weight of awareness. That is the cost of perception. And though it feels heavy now, it will eventually refine into wisdom that changes lives. This gift within you has been waiting for alignment, not applause. It has been waiting for you to stop measuring yourself against those who are louder, shinier, more obviously spiritual. Because the spirit doesn't choose by status. It chooses by surrender. And you are being invited into a surrender that unlocks quiet authority. A kind of influence that cannot be replicated because it doesn't come from talent. It comes from depth. But here is what you must understand. Sensitivity is not fragility. It's frequency. You are tuned to divine signal. That's why you can't ignore what others overlook. That's why you feel grief in songs. That's why the pain of strangers moves you. That's why justice feels like breath to your lungs. You are built not just to receive, but to interpret. You are a vessel, sacred, whole, chosen, not because of your perfection, but because of your receptivity. And yes, there will be times when your gift isolates you. But that is not punishment. That is preparation. Because the more in tune you are with spirit, the more silence you may need to protect the signal. You cannot broadcast clarity when you're surrounded by noise. You cannot carry wisdom when you're drowning in confusion. The gift will often lead you into hiddenness before it leads you into visibility. But hidden doesn't mean dormant. Hidden means holy. It means being prepared in secret for something public. It means carrying fire in quiet until it is safe to be seen. So if you are in the in-between, in the silence, in the ache that no one understands, know this. It is not the absence of movement. It is the deep inhale before spirit exhales through your life. And that exhale is coming. You won't need to force it. The gift moves through flow. You don't need to advertise it. The right ones will recognize it. You don't need to prove it. Presence will speak louder than proof ever could. In this moment, with this awareness, you are spiritually sensitive because you are spiritually sent. You are emotionally open because your gift moves through feeling. You are intuitively guided because the divine trusted you enough to carry insight for others. And the more you trust that, the more the gift unfolds, not just for you, but through you. Because your gift is not for isolation. It is for illumination. You are not meant to disappear into the world. You are meant to shift it. One room, one life, one act of obedience at a time. And it begins not when others affirm it, but when you do. There comes a moment in every awakened soul where recognition is no longer enough. Where knowing you are gifted is no longer satisfying. Where awareness begins to ache. Not because something is wrong, but because something is ready. That ache you felt, the restless yearning inside your chest that won't be quiet, that shows up in your dreams, in the silence, in the places you thought you'd buried it, that is sacred desire. It is not selfish. It is not indulgent. It is not worldly. It is the voice of heaven calling your soul into alignment with what it came here to do. Desire is the language of purpose, and when it stirs, you cannot ignore it forever. You can numb it, yes. Distract yourself, drown it in busyness or drown it in doubt, but it will return stronger, deeper, louder, because it is not asking for permission. It is pulling you into becoming, and that pull is holy. We have been taught to fear desire, told that it leads to ego, that it is dangerous, wild, ungoverned. But here's the truth. Desire is not dangerous. Unexamined desire is dangerous. Suppressed desire is destructive. But sacred desire, when listened to, honored, purified in stillness, becomes fuel. You were not made to be numb. You were not sent here to float through life avoiding risk and calling it wisdom. There is something in you that wants, and that wanting is not wrong. It's revelation in motion. Can you feel it now? That stirring you've tried to silence? That quiet fire that flickers behind your ribs when you imagine a life of full alignment? The image that flashes across your mind when you dare to wonder what it would feel like to be fully used by spirit? That's not fantasy. That's memory. That's truth trying to reintroduce itself. Because there is a life within you that has not yet been lived, a sound that has not yet been sung, a message that has not yet been spoken, a touch that has not yet healed, and your desire is trying to unlock it. But to walk into that kind of truth is not easy, because desire doesn't just awaken potential. It awakens conflict. The moment you begin to feel the weight of who you truly are, you also feel the resistance of who you've been pretending to be. The moment you start longing for movement, the chains of your comfort begin to rattle. And that tension, that spiritual pressure, it is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that you are on the threshold. This is the spiritual wilderness, the place between awakening and arrival, between knowing and embodying, between safety and surrender. It is where the old you begins to shed and the real you begins to emerge. And in that space, every part of you will be tested, not by punishment, but by permission. The question becomes, will you say yes to what you've been carrying all along? Because you can feel it, can't you? There's a version of you that haunts your imagination, not in fear, but in invitation. A version of you that moves with authority, that speaks and heaven responds, that walks into rooms and shifts energy without effort, that doesn't hide or shrink or apologize for existing. That version of you, is not fiction. It is the echo of your soul's intention. You've glimpsed it in flashes, in those rare moments where time slows and everything feels aligned. When you said the right words without knowing how. When someone wept after you prayed, even though you didn't plan what to say. When you felt the room go still and knew something divine was moving through you. That was not a lucky accident. That was your gift surfacing through surrender. But the gift cannot flow where it is not welcomed. And desire cannot become destiny until it is answered. You have to choose it. Not casually. Not someday. Now. Here. With trembling hands if you must. With unanswered questions if you must. But you must choose it. And this is the paradox. The moment you say yes to your gift, the world doesn't always affirm you. In fact, everything might feel like it's falling apart. People may grow distant. Circumstances may feel uncertain. Your inner fears might get louder. This is not a sign that you were wrong. It's a sign that you are leaving the old frequency. You're no longer compatible with the illusion. The spiritual static begins to clear, and everything not rooted in your true self begins to fall away. But underneath all that falling is freedom, because the moment you say yes to your gift, heaven begins to rearrange your life. Not for punishment, for positioning. Your desire is not just about your joy, it's about your assignment. There are people waiting for the version of you that hasn't fully shown up yet. People whose healing is tied to your obedience, whose awakening is waiting on your yes. This is not pressure. This is purpose. And purpose, when fully embraced, births clarity like nothing else. But if you don't say yes, if you ignore the ache, something deeper happens. You begin to feel disconnected, restless, tired in ways sleep cannot fix. You begin to wander from thing to thing, wondering why nothing satisfies. Why you feel empty even when you're busy. That's not depression. That's disobedience to your soul. That's the sound of destiny knocking. You were never meant to blend in. You were never meant to be neutral. You were meant to burn, with intention, with presence, with passion. That's why your desire feels like fire. Because it is. It is fire from the altar of your purpose, demanding to be released. And like any fire, it must consume. It must refine. It must burn away the dead things. The fear of judgment, the addiction to approval, the need to explain yourself to people not assigned to your path. Your gift cannot flow through a crowded heart. It needs space. Sacred space. So what are you willing to lay down? Your image? Your timeline? Your desire to do things perfectly? Because your desire will not wait for your perfection. It will only wait for your permission. God is not asking for your resume. He is asking for your response. And that response doesn't need to be eloquent. It doesn't need to be strategic. It only needs to be true. A whispered yes. A willingness to become who you already are beneath the noise. Because when desire is honored, it becomes fuel. When it is dismissed, it becomes pain. And you were never meant to live in pain. You were meant to live in purpose. So let the ache become action. Let the fire become movement. Let the longing become leadership. You don't need to have it all figured out. You only need to stop running from what's calling you. It's time. Not because everything is perfect, but because the desire hasn't left. And that is proof enough. What if your deepest craving isn't for success, but for surrender? What if the thing you're really longing for isn't applause, but alignment? What if everything you've ever wanted to feel is actually waiting on you to become? Let the longing speak now. Let the fire rise, not as a performance, but as a prayer. You have felt the pull. You have carried the ache. And now, the time has come to move. Because there is a moment in every soul's journey where stillness turns into motion, where waiting is no longer wisdom, but delay, where clarity is not found in further reflection, but in faithful obedience. This is that moment. You will never feel completely ready. You will never have every detail figured out. The soul does not operate by spreadsheets. Spirit doesn't send blueprints. It moves in nudges, in knowing, in whispers that require trust. And now, that whisper is not asking for more questions. It is asking for movement. You must walk now, not because you've mastered everything, but because the next revelation is waiting on the other side of obedience. You have stood long enough at the edge, imagining what it would feel like to live from your gift. Now it is time to become it. Not in theory, not in preparation, in motion. Because the gift does not activate in stillness alone. It breathes when you walk with it. It unfolds while you move. Action is not performance. It is agreement. It is saying, I trust what's inside of me enough to risk being seen. And yes, it will feel risky, because stepping out means exposure. It means visibility. It means vulnerability. But here's the truth most never tell you. The real risk is staying still. The real danger is hiding. The soul decays when it is silenced. The gift shrivels when it is buried. You were not created to be safe. You were created to be sent. You've said yes in your spirit. Now it's time to say yes with your life. That yes will not look the same for everyone. For some, it will be speaking when you'd rather be silent. For others, it will be walking away when comfort calls you to stay. For some, it will be writing the truth you've hidden in journals. For others, it will be laying hands on the sick, not knowing what will happen next. The form of the action is not the point. The obedience is. Heaven is not measuring your perfection. It is measuring your permission. And once you permit spirit to flow, even clumsily, even fearfully, you begin to live in the realm where miracles are no longer theory, but experience. Where the atmosphere shifts not because you intended it, but because your presence has aligned. There's a rhythm to spirit, and when you move with it, you become a current, not a container. Not a monument, a movement. But that movement has a cost. You must release your obsession with outcomes. You must release your attachment to applause. You must let go of needing results to feel legitimate. Because sometimes the greatest shift will not be visible. It will happen underground, in the soul of someone listening, in the life of someone watching you step out and realizing they can too. This is the ripple of obedience. It always moves further than you know. But it can only begin when you stop analyzing and start agreeing. And so I ask you, what is the thing you have been avoiding, not because it isn't right, but because it feels too sacred? What has spirit been pressing on your chest to do, and you've told yourself, not yet? There is no not yet in eternity. There is only yes or delay. And delay has a cost. Every time you postpone your obedience, you teach your soul that fear is your leader. And every time you choose action, however small, you rewire your being to trust your spiritual design. That is why this moment matters. Not because it's dramatic, but because it is decisive. There will be no trumpet, no spotlight, no music swelling in the background. Just you, and spirit, and a quiet prompting that says, now. This is your now. You've been prepared for it, not in public, but in private. In the nights no one saw. In the prayers that didn't have answers. In the conversations where your words shook, but your spirit stayed. That was training. That was formation. And now, the unseen oil is ready to pour. The gift is not something you prove. It is something you pour. And it begins with one choice. One step. One yes, even if I'm scared. You don't need a crowd. You don't need validation. You don't need a plan. You need obedience. Because the world doesn't change through strategy. It changes through surrendered action. Imagine what would shift if you lived today as though your gift was already flowing. Imagine what would happen if you stopped asking, what if I'm not ready? And started asking, what if I've been ready all along and just afraid to believe it? You are not stepping into something new. You are revealing what's always been there. The enemy of your soul doesn't fear your knowledge. He fears your movement. He fears the moment your yes becomes embodied. Because once you move, you activate a chain reaction the darkness cannot contain. Heaven begins to amplify what you activate. Doors begin to open not because you forced them, but because you arrived. Do you understand? The moment you become what you've been praying about, the atmosphere adjusts. But you cannot fake this. You cannot skip the quiet yes and leap into public performance. What you do not live privately will never carry power publicly. The gift is forged in surrender and expressed in motion. So begin. Begin unsure. Begin unqualified. Begin with trembling hands and a quiet voice. Begin while others are still talking about their someday. Begin before you feel brave. Begin with the little thing. Because the little thing is always the big thing in disguise. And as you begin, you will notice something miraculous. Not everything will get easier, but you will get stronger. You will begin to recognize your own authority. You will feel the shift in how you carry yourself, in how you speak, in what you no longer tolerate. Because once you start walking in your gift, you cannot go back to pretending you are powerless. And yes, not everyone will understand. Some will criticize what they do not have the courage to attempt. Some will question your motives, your methods, your momentum. Let them. You are not called to be understood. You are called to be obedient. You are not called to appease. You are called to align. And when you align with spirit, you will always disturb what prefers comfort. Let it be disturbed. Because every act of obedience is a confrontation with the counterfeit. And you, beloved, are the real. You are not just anointed in theory. You are activated in presence. So walk, speak, move, give, pray, lead, release. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. Not because you feel powerful, but because you are connected to power. The wind will catch you, the oil will flow, and the gift, once dormant, will rise. Not from striving, from surrender, not for applause, but for assignment. The world is not waiting on another concept. It is waiting on your courage. There comes a shift, not with thunder, not with fireworks, but in silence. A sacred silence where something inside you finally stops trying and starts being. It doesn't announce itself with dramatic applause. It arrives like a whisper that won't leave, like a presence that settles on your skin. And in that moment, you realize this is no longer about doing something for God or proving something to the world. This is about becoming the one you were always meant to be. You are no longer just activating your gift. You are now embodying it. You are not a vessel that occasionally pours. You are a stream that never stops flowing. This is transformation. And it didn't happen all at once. It happened in layers. Through the ache of waiting. Through the tension of surrender. Through the trembling of action. And now, what once felt like effort feels like breath. What once needed pushing now moves on its own. Because your inner state has shifted. Because the roots have finally gone deep enough that the tree no longer fears the wind. You have become rooted. This is what alignment feels like. It doesn't mean everything is perfect. It means you are aligned, and so your world can no longer dictate your identity. You no longer react to circumstance, you respond from your center. Because your center is not chaos. It is truth. It is presence. It is power. Not loud power. Not the kind that demands attention. Quiet power. The kind that shifts rooms without saying a word. You walk differently now. You speak from a different frequency. And those who were never meant to hear you might still not understand, but those who are assigned to your voice, they feel it, without explanation, without marketing, without effort, because truth recognizes truth. Spirit finds spirit, and the moment you live from your gift, you become the mirror through which others see themselves clearly. You are no longer looking for the open door. You are the open door. You are no longer waiting for confirmation. You are the confirmation. This is not arrogance. This is alignment. Because when you stop apologizing for who you are in God, you give others permission to step out of hiding too. You are not performing the gift anymore. You are revealing your design. And what's even more sacred, you are not forcing fruit to grow. It comes naturally. It flows because the vine never forces. It abides. And abiding is enough. You are no longer striving. You are abiding. That is where power lives. Not in performance. Not in perfection. But in presence. You have become a sanctuary now. A living sanctuary. A walking temple. People enter your presence and feel peace not because of your words, but because of your essence. You've stopped trying to convince the world you matter. You know you do. And that knowing radiates. It carries frequency. But here's the part most people don't tell you. When transformation comes, it doesn't just elevate, it also separates. Not everyone can go with you. Not everyone will recognize you. There will be rooms where you used to belong, that now feel too small. There will be people you once craved approval from, who now misunderstand you. And that's okay, because transformation always includes transference. A shedding, a closing of the old season, a quiet goodbye to what no longer aligns. You do not owe anyone a smaller version of you to make them comfortable. Your light is not too much. It is exactly what someone else is waiting to see. And if your rising disturbs their shadows, then so be it. You were not called to protect someone else's illusion. You were called to embody truth. And that embodiment isn't just about public expression. It's about private integration. About how you show up when no one is watching. About the way you talk to yourself. About how you handle delay. About how you hold space for others without losing your own center. Because the gift matures not in platforms, but in the quiet consistency of alignment. This is not the climax. This is the continuum. Transformation is not a single moment. It is a new frequency you live in. A state of awareness you no longer dip into, you now dwell there. Even in chaos, even in confusion, even when things around you don't make sense, you are not shaken. Because peace is no longer something you chase. It is something you carry. That's the real power. That's the unseen authority that the world cannot imitate. You now move as one who remembers. And when you remember, you stop seeking permission. You no longer pray from desperation, but from co-creation. You stop asking, God, do you see me? And start saying, God, flow through me. You are not waiting for signs in the sky. You are walking as the sign on the earth. That is what it means to live transformed. And the beautiful mystery of it all. You don't need to announce it. You just are. And what you are speaks louder than anything you ever say. You don't need to force the gift. It moves through you now, not like a performance, but like your second skin. When you speak, there is resonance. When you touch, there is healing. When you pray, there is impact. Not because you are powerful, but because you are present. And presence is rare in a world addicted to performance. You are the interruption, the holy disruption, the embodied answer to someone's buried question. Not because you know everything, but because you have become available. And in the kingdom, availability matters more than ability. You've stopped chasing the next thing. You've stopped running from silence. You've stopped shrinking for the sake of being understood. Because you now know, it is better to be misunderstood while aligned than admired while false. And this place of wholeness, of rooted flow, of luminous surrender, this is the real reward. This is the place the striving never reached. This is the peace the world could never counterfeit. And from this place, you now multiply. Not through effort, through essence. You are no longer just one who has a gift. You have become the gift.